Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Natural Female Muscle Podcast for episode number 47, where today we are going to talk about why your food isn't quote unquote high in off season, or why it isn't, as high as you think it is, or I suppose why you even think, why is your food low? And we're going to talk about all things with this topic in terms of, I suppose, the concept of it itself, and also what could potentially be leading to that. Because there are, I suppose, like two sides to this. There's the fact of, why do we even think about this in the first place? Like, what constitutes too high food? What constitutes too low food? And why are we worrying about that? That's really the main thing. So welcome to today's episode. Thank you for joining me again to hear me ramble on about just random bodybuilding topics, really. These are all always just things that kind of pop into my head, whether they're things I'm hearing other people talking about with clients. But as always, please do shoot across any suggestions you do have, because I want to talk about, relevant topics, things that people are worried about, concerned about, even if they're just short little episodes. I think it's just a nice little refresh. But yeah, thank you very much to everyone who is joining me today. As always, before you listen to the episode, if you can give me a rating on Spotify, that would be absolutely fantastic. By the way, I think I've said before, like, it really helps me out. Like, I'm not getting anything from it. It's just more so that other people can hopefully see that people like the podcast when they click on it. It's got a good amount of ratings, and it just helps me in that sense, because I want to be able to reach as many people with these messages as possible. So anyway, let's dive into the topic before I just go off on a tangent. Now, this is definitely something that I think people worry about way more than they need to. Like, how often, I have this conversation all the time with clients, prospective clients, like even on consultation calls as well. And it's something that I used to worry about all the time, was like, why is my food so low? Or like, is it too low for where I should be compared to other people? And this is obviously the problem we have with social media sometimes, is, so-and-so's done an off-season update and they are eating 4,500 calories. Well, shit, I'm only eating, 2,500 calories. Like, am I doing something wrong? Am I going to struggle to diet? Am I, not making enough progress? And it's the exact same, really. It's the exact same silly comparison that you kind of get with low food, because you can end up on two ends of the spectrum. You can either be worrying that your food is too low, or that your food is even too high for some individuals as well, when their food does get super, super high. But the reality is, we have to think like, okay, what is actually the goal with our food right now? What is the goal with what we're doing? It's the same thing as when you're in deficit. Like, the goal is to create an appropriate surplus, an environment where you can legitimately have the energy available to add on muscle mass and still be in a good body composition that enables you to perform well, that you're gaining at an appropriate rate of gain, where you're not just putting on more body fat relative to what is going to be actually productive, and also relative to muscle mass. And of course, like, just generally staying productive with that, like, not just being at a point where you have like poor digestion, your appetite sucks, you're extremely lethargic, you are gaining at such a rate that you also then maybe like cut that phase short, because you gain too much body fat too fast. And even like you within your own management, like, you now feel uncomfortable. You don't feel good in the gym. You don't feel good outside of the gym. And all of the management of this is based on the individual. Everyone will be eating different levels of food. And this is also why, coaching is so important, because you are looking at that individual. You are looking at that individual day by day, week by week. How is their body weight trending? How are they feeling? How are they looking? What's your performance like? Like, is your performance actually going up, or are you struggling? Are you starting to feel a bit sluggish? Are you still managing to get your food in okay? Like, it's all different. It's all relative, you know, because the amount of food that we're all going to need to eat is going to be relative to, like, where's your body fat at? What is your metabolic rate? What is your lifestyle? And of course, adherence is a huge thing as well, which is going to be something that we do come on to. But let's talk about just then in general. Even say, you know, you have that level of food and you're still worrying about this, like, why are you telling yourself, like, why are you sitting and thinking, oh, my food's not high? Because I'll tell you something, like, I've been there where I have eaten a crazy high amount of food. And this was a really big thing in like 2019, which makes me feel ill that was 5 years ago now. Where I did my first off season, and it was like a really big thing at the time where everyone was like, I get my girls eating this amount of food. And I was eating a lot of food. You know, I was eating 3.5, nearly 4,000 calories daily. Whereas like now, like in an off season, like for me to be gaining at an appropriate rate of gain, I'm eating about like 300 carbs, 60 fat daily, nothing crazy. But in the first instance, like I was just kind of eating like for the sake of it. Like I was actually gaining too fast. I was also too fat in the end. You know, I gained a lot of body weight in a very short period of time. Now that I actually think about it, I went from 47 kilos to 59 kilos. So I'm talking like 25, 30 pounds, something like that, in 5 months, which is, it's a lot, you know, that's like over £1 a week. That's like just too fast, you know. And in the other instance, like nowadays, like I'm looking for an appropriate rate of gain. So my food now, if you can compare that, my food is now like lower at the end of these growing phases. It's lower when I go into a diet. So my food was very, very high in that first instance before I went into prep. And this was the thing that everyone talks about. And this is what everyone worries about, is going, oh, my food is so low. Like, how am I going to go into a diet phase? Like, I'm not eating 4,000 calories. Like, where do I pull from? And this is where we need to do a bit of myth busting, because people think that the higher your food is in off season, the better prep you will have. And that is not really how it works, because a surplus is a surplus and a deficit is a deficit. Like, yes, if you have more muscle and you spend more time growing, you'll probably be eating more. And obviously, if you're consistent, you will have that baseline to pull from. But like, energy balance is the ruling factor here. You know, like, it does not matter how much food you shove down your throat in off season or in the surplus. Like, if you are consuming then just a crazy amount of calories over what you need to be in for maintenance, you're still going to have to pull yourself down into a deficit. So like, this is what happened with me, is like I was eating 3,500, 4,000 calories, and then I go into a deficit, and in the back end of that prep, I'm eating less than 1,000 calories, you know, and I had to make a massive, massive, massive shift to even get myself moving back into a deficit, because my surplus was just so high. And at the end of the day, I was still only like the same size, you know, there's nothing has changed. Like, yes, I've got a bit more muscle, but I still need to get back down into a deficit at the end of the day. And this is where then you have to go, are you actually then even making it worse? Because you now have so much to lose. Like, you have so much body fat to come off, and or even just the disparity from what you're then having to eat in an off season to what you're then having to eat to get into a deficit is so significant. Like, you're almost in for a bit more of a shock, because you've been eating so much to now eating what feels like so little. And yeah, there's that argument of like, you know, get you feeling sick of food at the end of off season, great. But then prep feels honestly fucking awful, because you're just going from so much to so little in comparison. And that can be very, very difficult. And that's where then it's like I say, it's the rate of loss that you then have to experience if you have put on so much body fat with that surplus for, like I say, eating for the sake of eating, that becomes so difficult because remember, like, the myth busting here is like the more food that you eat doesn't mean that you're in a better position metabolically. If anything, if you're eating so much food and you're eating really poor quality food sources and you're getting to a point where, like, hormonally you're actually not in a great spot, you could be making it worse for yourself, because now, like, you've got crap insulin sensitivity, your blood glucose management is really bad. You're maybe actually in a point where, because there's obviously a sweet spot for everyone, like if you get to a point where, things are moving well, you're feeling well, you're eating good foods, like, you're going to have good hormonal regulation, whereas you might even get to a point where you actually push so far that then your thyroid output actually gets worse, and then you're now in a worse position, essentially. So it's like, don't feel pressured and don't feel like you have to eat more food for the sake of it. And this is where sometimes, like, I get clients who will check in and they'll be like, Loz, we've not increased food in a good while, and, like, my appetite's good, and, like, why am I not eating more? And I go, okay, let's look at where things are at. So we've seen a really good rate of gain, not just this week, but this whole past few months. You've been gaining around 0.5 pound per week. You've gained 4 pounds the past 2 months. Your training performance is moving really well. Your body composition is in a good spot. Your appetite is good, which is a good thing. And we're also looking to spend a really good amount of time in this gaining phase. So, like, right now, we're on a great trajectory. So why would I put in more food to the point where then you start to see negative returns? Like, then you're going to start to gain excess body fat. You're going to start to, which then again makes it harder to pull off. So then you're in for a harder diet anyway. But then you're potentially cutting that phase short because you're going to start to run into, before you know it, and this is the thing that people forget, is like, I think sometimes we're scared of feeling good in gaining phases, like feeling like you are hungry for meals, feeling like digestion is good. You don't feel like shit on the day-to-day basis. And, like, people think, oh, I should be feeling really bad. No, you shouldn't. Like, you shouldn't. Like, maybe if you've been pushing for a very long time and you are at higher body fat levels, there will be days that are difficult, but you shouldn't be really unproductive in those phases, especially if you're wanting to make a lot of progress, because the more time that you can spend productively in a surplus, the better. So I think remembering that is really, really, really important. Because, if you want to grow, you want to make progress, you just need to be in a productive surplus. That is it. So don't compare to what other people are doing. Especially if, like, for example, in my situation, I'm not going to be eating crazy food in off season, just like I don't eat crazy food when I diet. And that's not because there's anything wrong with me. It's because I'm a small human. I'm a small human. I don't have, like, crazy genetics or crazy metabolic rate. Like, I just eat what I need to be in a surplus. I eat what I need to be in a deficit, bottom line. So that's really the first and most important thing for us to remember. Eat for your own demands and eat for your goal, and what you're working towards. So that is the main thing. The next thing then, aside from that, so that first thing is all kind of prefacing, okay, so you are actually doing everything you need. Your food is just at an appropriate level. Now, there are some circumstances where people do not have very high food in their off season or in their gaining phases. And we're going to obviously rule out any potential hormonal or physiological issues, because that is another conversation in itself. And that is something that, on a person by person basis, you probably need to look a little bit deeper at what is going on there and actually address that. But for some people, like, their food is not very high and they don't have the opportunity to increase their food. And the number one reason for this is adherence. Adherence is the main reason, and lack of adherence, why food isn't being increased. And what I mean by this is because you're either just simply not eating like hitting your macros or eating a meal plan, and you're just being inconsistent with it, missing meals here and there, or not hitting your macros some days and then going over other days. And there's just so much inconsistency that it's almost impossible to tell where things are at. That's one situation. Or the other one, which is very common, is eating things outside or on top of your plan. So like just picking on things here and there, like, oh, I just, had a bit more dark chocolate, or I, had a few more oats, or, I was picking on this or added in that. And then of course there's the off plans as well. But this is where then it's like, okay, I don't have a picture of how much food you're eating. And what these people then don't realize is that because you're adding in bits here and there, you're basically in effect creating more of your own surplus, but that surplus is also very, very inconsistent, because, some days you're picking on things and maybe you're having 400 calories more one day, 200 another, 150 here, 200 there, and it's just all over the place. So you're not giving your coach that opportunity to actually increase your food, because you're in effect doing it yourself on an inconsistent basis. But then you're also kind of shooting yourself in the foot psychologically, because you feel like, oh, my food's not increased, my food's not higher. And it's like, but it is. But it's because you're kind of subconsciously adding more on top of your meal plan, rather than actually giving yourself the ability to like add a nice little 250 calorie increase on your meal plan, and have that consistently daily, and enjoy your food and enjoy the structure, enjoy the increases that are in place there. So like that's something that you do have to be very, very aware of and very mindful of, because if you want to see your food go up, like you need to have that consistent baseline that your coach can then see in the check-in, like, oh, okay, like this is actually where weight average is, like let's put some more food in. Whereas if you're checking, you're like, oh, but I want more food in, and I'm going, well, I can't tell what your response is at all, because you're not adhering at a baseline. And we also want to be able to build up your baseline food, because if you build up your baseline food, you have a more consistent caloric intake on the day to day, which is not only helpful for you like psychologically when it comes to satiety, enjoying a meal plan, feeling content with your structure, but it's also really important to consistently fuel your performance and give you also consistent results and consistent feedback as well. Because if it is very much up and down, you're not able to build up your baseline food, you're missing out on honestly a lot of progress that you could be getting. And this is usually more so affected by off-plan meals. So this is like obviously picking on things here and there plays a role, but the off-plan meals plays probably the biggest role, because that's where you can very, very easily take on board your entire surplus for the week in one sitting. So you might go through most of the week and food is like body weight, is literally just like holding. And that would be where, you'd want a nice increase, but then you have an off-plan meal and your body weight goes up a few pounds, and then that takes on board the entire surplus for the week. And that's where learning to manage those occasions is important, because yeah, on paper, the surplus is still moving cool, but then you're struggling on the day to day because you're so hungry across the week, potentially, that then you kind of get yourself in this cycle where you're like hungry across the week, so you're craving an off-plan meal, then you have a big off-plan meal, but then you're hungry again across the week, and then you're frustrated that your food isn't higher. That's a problem, because you're not giving yourself that opportunity to actually just build up your food across the week and be able to manage your off-plan meals better. But then you're also missing out again on that opportunity of just having a nice consistent influx of food day to day, which again is going to help you with performance, going to help you with keeping body comp in a good spot. It's going to help you with keeping appetite in a good spot, digestion, all of that, those things that we want to gain that positive feedback from. And especially in a post-show phase, post-prep phase, post-diet phase, if your caloric intake is fluctuating massively on the day to day, especially if it's like low, super high, that also poses a real issue when it comes to hormonal regulation, particularly when it comes to regaining your menstrual cycle, because it affects like the pulsality of like releasing the hormones that play a massive role in the menstrual cycle. Like it's been especially shown that with like LH, it plays a huge role. And that's why then people struggle with like regaining their menstrual cycle, because there's no regularity in the pulsality of what you need to see there. So that's where you've got to like actually think, okay, is this actually good for me? Like health wise, obviously you can look at the mindset aspect, but there's that to take into consideration as well. But it plays, as much as that's more of a post-show topic, it still plays a role in just general off season as well. And it's why people will struggle with building up their food and developing just a good relationship with food on the day to day in the off season, because before you know it, then you get to a point where you have built up your food to a good level where, yes, you might still be like, ready for meals, which is a good thing, but you're generally satiated. You're generally satiated across the day to day. You look forward to off-pan meals, but you're able to manage them better within your energy balance. And you've also then built yourself up to a point where you can incorporate an off-pan meal better within your day-to-day energy balance. So that's so important. Like adherence really, really, really is so important within that. And ultimately, like when you're looking at wanting to get your best results, if that's what you're striving for, like adhering better is going to play the best possible role in giving you those best results, because you're, especially as a coach, is going to get the best view of also what's going on, and they're going to be able to coach you as best as possible. So that's something that is genuinely super, super, super important. There are also, of course, like I've said, like outliers when, food is low, where maybe your lifestyle is very low demanding. Maybe you're not doing a huge amount of expenditure, or you're generally like quite sedentary, or whatever it may be. Obviously, that's where you look at, okay, what can I keep myself accountable with? Can I still make sure that I have a good routine with my steps? Can I still make sure I do my CV? Can I still make sure that I'm putting effort into my sessions? Because they are energy demanding tasks. And if you start to drop off from those, and this is sometimes what happens at the end of off season for people, and it's why rate of gain can creep up, because you get a little bit lazier with those habits. Your steps are dropping off, you're not doing cardio anymore, and then that also plays a negative role with digestion, negative role with appetite, rate of gain starts to creep up, performance actually starts to feel worse. So also keep yourself accountable with those things that will keep those off-season phases productive. These are all really, really important things to take on board. So hopefully, like, I know this has been a bit of a short episode today, but I did just want to touch on that topic briefly, because these are things that I sometimes wish I could like talk about in a post, but I just have too much to say, and I don't have the ability to bring topics like this into a 1 minute Instagram reel, because I just talk too much and it's too difficult. So hopefully that has been a helpful episode for you guys to listen to today, whether this is something that you're struggling with yourself, or even when it comes to, coaching other clients, other athletes. And I suppose it does go for even just like, like lifestyle clients who are wanting to, improve their diet and build their food up as well. The same thing really goes with all these things. So hopefully it's been a helpful episode for you guys. As always, please send me across any of your suggestions for the next episodes. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back with another one next week.